The AFC feels wide open right now. There isn't one team that's really separating from the rest, and the market knows it. In this report, we're not here to debate teams or argue hot takes. We're here to look at what's actually happening underneath the surface. We'll start with how the market is priced in the AFC, and then look at where teams stand, how they're actually playing, and then what they're built on. And then finally, what happens when we run it all through a simulation. So no predictions, no hype, just a clear look at who's positioned well and who is not. This is Grandstand Sports Data, and welcome to Volume 1 of Ball Street. Before we talk about team stats or predictions, we need to start with one thing: how the AFC is being priced right now. And here's the current AFC Championship Futures Board, and those odds tell us one thing: how likely the market thinks each team is to win the AFC. So the percentages on the right are just the odds translated into chances. At the top of the board, there's three teams that stand out right now. We have Buffalo, New England, and Denver. They're priced as the AFC's top tier. Then the market views these three as, the AFC's early elites. They're priced almost identically with no clear separation from each other. After that, there is a clear drop. You have Houston and Jacksonville. They sit in that next group. So they're respected but not trusted at the same level as those top three. And then the market sees them as, real contenders but with more question marks. Then you start to see the longer odds. Teams like the Chargers, Ravens, Steelers, even the Chiefs, they're priced further down the board. Some of these teams are more familiar names. Some carry strong reputations, but right now the market is assigning them much smaller chances to win the AFC. Then at the bottom, you have teams that the market sees as long shots. These teams are, still technically alive, but the market is clearly skeptical that they can even make a deep run. At this stage, we're not saying the market is right. We're not saying it's also wrong. We're just establishing the baseline here. So now that we know that the AFC is being priced, the next step is simple. Where do these teams actually stand right now? Now that we've seen how the market is priced in the AFC, here's where those same teams actually sit in the standings. This is the current playoff picture as of today. At the top, we have Denver and New England both sitting at 11 and 2, each holding first place in their divisions and a clear home field track. Next, you have teams leading their divisions, but with less breathing room. We're talking about Jacksonville and Pittsburgh. They fall into this group, and they're in first place right now, but one bad stretch can flip the picture quickly. And behind the division leaders, we're going to have the Chargers, Bills, and Texans. They occupy those wild card positions. So all three have winning records, and all three control their paths into the playoffs. Now, Indy sits one spot out of the playoffs at 8-5, and they're in the AFC South hunt, while Baltimore, Kansas City, and Miami sit in the wild card bubble, each needing varying degrees of help to stay alive. And then we have Cincinnati. They're sitting at 4-9. They're still mathematically alive, but in need of almost everything to break in their way. So now that we know where teams stand, the next question is going to be real simple. Are they actually playing at the level that supports their position? So we've looked at where teams sit in the standings. Now we're asking a simple question. Do the numbers actually support those records? So for each AFC contender, you're looking at our power rating and where it ranks league wide, and then the ranks for each of the stats that make up those power ratings. So no storylines, no narratives, only a clear look at where each team ranks in the metrics that drive power ratings. So some teams have records that line up well with how they played. Teams like Houston, Indy, New England, Buffalo, and even Jacksonville, they consistently rank well across multiple categories. You don't have to agree on who's best here, but the underlying numbers say that these teams are regularly outplaying their opponent and not just sneaking by them. So their efficiency profile, it generally matches the idea of a serious AFC contender. Then you've got a middle band, right? You got the teams like Denver and Pittsburgh. They're competitive. They show strengths in some columns and soft spots in others. They're not getting smoked, but they're also not dominating the board the way that the top group is. So these are the teams where the question is kind of less, can they make the playoffs? And more, does the efficiency say that they can run through the conference? Now, on the other side, some teams look worse in the standings than they do in the data. Teams like Kansas City and the Chargers, they still show strong underlying performance in several areas, even if the wins haven't fully stacked up. These are the teams where results haven't caught up yet, or close games just haven't gone their way. And then finally, there are teams where the numbers just aren't backing things up. We got teams like Cincinnati, Miami, and even Baltimore. They sit near the bottom across multiple categories. When you see that many red flags at once, it usually means that wins are hard to sustain, games feel tighter than they should, and pressure situations get riskier. And again, this isn't about the eye test or quarterback narratives, right? We're not talking injuries, coaching, or betting results just yet. We've now seen what the market thinks, where teams stand, and how they've actually played. Next, we're going to take a look at the performances and what they are built on. And if you like this type of analysis, finding hidden value, I want you guys to hit that like button and support the Ball Street concept so that we know to continue this series. All right, so up to this point, we've looked at the results. Now we're looking at what those results are built on. So this board isn't about points or wins, it's about how stable these teams actually are going forward. We're looking at four things that matter once the season gets tight, right? We're looking at quarterback play. This is both what we've seen this regular season and what quarterback career playoff production looks like when we run through our algorithm. So that's basically what we did here. We used our algorithm. We have videos on that. We will put some links in the description down below. We'll probably put our most recent video. And what we did was regular season play for the 2025 season. And then on the right side number, it's playoff numbers when you just add these 12 quarterbacks. So you're going to see guys like Drake May has an NA for not available. He's never played in the playoffs. You're going to see NA for the regular season for Joe Burrow. That's just because he doesn't have enough passing attempts. You'll also see the same thing for Phillip Rivers down here because that's the projected quarterback that we used. Hope that makes sense. Now we're going to move on to the coaching stability. This is the rankings pulled directly from our NFL coaching model. So how these staffs handle in-game decisions, adjustments, and also situational football. We did walk through a tutorial on how to make this model. We will also leave a link in the description down below for that video so you know everything that goes into this coaching model. Next will be injuries. This is just simply, not injuries necessarily in general, but we're ranking the value lost, how many key players and how impactful they are, and then add in how long they are out. So that's basically what we're ranking. We're ranking them 1 through 12. Next is going to be the schedule stress. This is the strength of schedule. You're going to see what they face so far. That's going to represent the RS or regular season. And then the right column is going to represent between the 12 contenders in their future schedule. So, as you can see, you got to remember that the ranks do go backwards. So 32nd in the NFL means the weakest schedule that they faced. You would do the same thing on the right side. Remember, we're only ranking the 12 teams that you see here. So number 12 will be the easiest schedule on paper, which will be Cincinnati. Hope that makes sense. Now, some of these teams check multiple boxes here. Teams like Kansas City, Buffalo, Jacksonville, Indy, I would say New England and Houston as well. They have the reliable quarterback situations, whether it's regular season, playoffs, and then they got the coaching that doesn't necessarily get in the way. Now they also have injuries that haven't piled up just yet and schedules that aren't about to overwhelm them going forward. So that doesn't mean those teams are perfect. It just means that these profiles tend to hold their weight, especially going into January. Then you're going to have teams that are getting production, but also have some red flags. I'm talking about the Chargers. They have a strong quarterback talent, as you can see, with Justin Herbert. I will say that his playoff production does drop off. He's 11th out of the 12 eligible quarterbacks here. His playoff production is miserable. And then you got to add in the fact that the injuries have piled up on the offensive line. They are 12th in terms of value injuries. So coming in last out of the 12 teams. Next is going to be Cincinnati. They have a playoff capable quarterback profile, but Burrow being unavailable for the regular season or the regular season games makes them play catch up just way too often. And you mix that in with one of the worst injury foundations on the board. It's not a good look for Cincinnati just when you're talking fundamentals. Next will be Miami. They have a mid-tier quarterback profile paired with one of the most challenging coaching and injury combinations here. So not necessarily good for them. So these teams can still win, but they're walking a thinner line. Teams like Denver, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh, they sit in the middle. They got coaching ranges from solid to basically above average. Quarterback play varies dramatically between regular season and playoff projection. Also, injuries and schedule shaping create some pressure points there as well. But these are the teams where one or two, breaks, good or bad, can change their story really, really fast. So this isn't about hype. It's not who wants it more. This is where future value and future risk usually starts. So if you want to see the same breakdown done for the NFC, please drop NFC in the comments section down below. All right, so at Ball Street, we've already covered the records, the performance, and the structure. Now we're going to look at something simpler. If you had bet these teams all season, did they actually make money for your wallet? Not how good they look, not how many games they won, just what happened to your wallet. So this table is going to show the three things. First, how teams performed against the spread. Second, how they performed against the money line. And then third, a combined score that shows how friendly or unfriendly the market has been overall. So think of it as a report card for betting results, not necessarily football opinions. A few teams stand out right away. They didn't just win games, they actually paid for you trusting them. The Patriots, Jaguars, Texans, Broncos, Dolphins, even the Bolts I would add in. They've really give you some positive outcome whether you went against the spread or on the money line. But on the other side, we have teams like the Chiefs, Ravens, Bills, and Bengals who are just not making money. And even when they win, they often don't win by enough, or they're priced so expensively that the risk outweighs the reward. So these teams carry what we call public tax. You pay more just to be involved. So this is why records alone can be misleading. Two teams can have similar records, right? But one grows your bankroll and the other drains it. The market doesn't care about how good a team feels. It only cares whether the price was right or not. So now that we've seen how the market has treated these teams so far, next we're going to take everything we've covered, performance, structure, market results, and we're going to see what happens when we project forward. All right, now we're going to put everything all together and ask one simple question. If the rest of the season and the playoffs played out over and over again, what usually happens? So this isn't necessarily a prediction, it's just the most common outcome after running 10,000 Monte Carlo simulations. So, first we got the New England Patriots. They're finishing first more often in the simulation. They're priced near the top of the futures market. They already controlled their division and their efficiency numbers are very, very strong. They also happen to be one of the best teams to bet this year, which tells you the market hasn't caught up yet. Next will be Denver. They're right behind them. They're priced as an elite team, and the numbers support their record. Moving on to Houston. Houston is where things start to get interesting, right? They weren't priced like a top AFC team early, but their performance numbers are strong, their fundamentals are solid, and they don't have many red flags. So they also haven't punished bettors the way some public teams have. Speaking of those teams, Buffalo. Buffalo makes the playoffs often, but really comfortably. So their efficiency is good, but not dominant. They're priced aggressively in the market, and they've been a mixed bag for some bettors this season. Jacksonville, they're going to show up consistently, but with less margin. They have a solid record and enough efficiency to survive, but they're not separating themselves. They're good enough to be in the field, but maybe not strong enough to control it. Then next we have a little bit of a surprise here, Kansas City. Kansas City's going to sneak in more often than people probably expect. They've been one of the worst teams to bet, which tells you they're probably overpriced, but structurally, quarterback, coaching, experience, they always need to be taken serious. Next is going to be Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh usually grabs one of the last division spots. Their numbers aren't great, and they've survived a lot of close games, but that's who gets in for that division. Now, who missed the playoffs? We're talking about a team like the Chargers. The Chargers miss more often than they make it. They've been decent on the money line, but their efficiency numbers don't really separate them. They're always close, but always, being always close doesn't travel well in the postseason. Next is going to be the Colts. The Colts hang around, but their path is just too tough. Their future schedule is harder, and injuries have them more exposed than some of the teams above them. Next is going to be the Ravens. Baltimore is another team in the simulation that doesn't, the Monte Carlo simulation didn't necessarily love. Their efficiency numbers are mediocre. They've they've been basically brutal for bettors, and structurally they're just one injury away from falling apart. That one injury is probably Lamar Jackson, even though his production does drop in the playoffs. Bengals will be next. Cincinnati almost never gets there. The record is bad, the numbers are bad, and then the structure just isn't stable. They basically need a miracle to get into the playoffs. Dolphins come in last. Miami technically stays alive in the standings, but the simulation treats them like a long shot. They don't perform well by the numbers, and they haven't rewarded bettors, and their structure is just too fragile. Now we're going to move on to the wild card and the most common paths there. So for the wild card round, Buffalo beats Pittsburgh most often. Buffalo has better efficiency and a better quarterback at the moment, so that's why they move on. Houston versus Jacksonville. Houston beats Jacksonville more often than not. Houston's numbers are stronger, and Jacksonville doesn't have enough separation. Next would be Kansas City versus Denver. Kansas City beating Denver shows up a lot here with our model. Denver is good, but Kansas City's experience and then the playoff quarterback, that playoff quarterback play keep them alive when the margins are going to get tighter. Moving on to the divisional round, Houston versus Buffalo. Houston beating Buffalo is one of the biggest takeaways that I think is here. Buffalo carries more market pressure and a tougher path. Houston, with their amazing defense, playing at home with Stroud usually upping his game in the playoffs, that's probably going to take the cake here. Kansas City versus New England. Kansas City beating New England happens surprisingly more often than it does not. New England is excellent, but their playoff path is questionable at best, right? Is Drake May Joe Montana, or is he Justin Herbert come playoff time? This many questions at the most important time, plus mix in the squad opposite of you that has experience up the ass. That's not a good recipe to move on for New England. AFC Championship would be Houston versus Kansas City. The most common AFC Championship result is that Houston over Kansas City. Not because Houston's better, but because they are the more well-balanced team, just looking at the metrics. So Kansas City gets there, but the margin finally disappears. So remember, this doesn't necessarily tell us who will win the AFC. It just tells us where paths are clean and where they are crowded. So this is the type of probability work we'll keep doing if you want, if you want the NFC version coming up next week. Just let us know in the comments section down below, and we will cover the NFC next week. All right. So we haven't told you what to do with your money yet. So we've shown you how the market is pricing teams, how they're actually playing, how stable they are underneath, and then how betting them has treated wallets and what the future paths look like. Now we're going to put it all together. This isn't about who's the best team, it's about who's priced wrong. Remember that. Who's priced wrong. Number one's going to be Houston. This is a buy, according to us. By the numbers, they're one of the strongest teams in the AFC. Structurally, they're stable, no major cracks, no reliance on luck, and despite that, the market still isn't pricing them like a true top tier team. That's usually value. Kansas City, they're also a buy. Kansas City is, you have to think of it like this. They've been terrible to bet week to week, which is exactly why the future price has fallen. But structurally, you're talking about quarterback, coaching, playoff experience. They're still one of the safest teams on the board, and the market has overreacted to short term pain. That's going to create opportunity. Some holds here are going to be New England. They're strong, but by the numbers, structurally sound and well respected by the market. But because everyone already knows that, you're going to be paying full price. So there's nothing wrong with them. There's just no edge. Jacksonville's also going to be a hold. Their performance lines up with their price, not overly hyped. They're not being ignored. They're getting what you basically pay for. Pittsburgh will also be a hold. They're surviving more than dominating. The market knows it, and that's some value, but there is some value, but just not enough to be aggressive. Indy, they're a hold. I would even be on the verge of a sell here. They're priced low for a reason, but not unfairly. There's some upside, but also real risk. I guess the volatility just lays on Philip Rivers, in my opinion. Just standing aside and not touching them makes more sense to us. Cincinnati's also a hold. They're cheap, but that's because the numbers and structure haven't been good. They're not overpriced. They're just very, very limited and one game away from elimination, just like the next team, which is Miami. The market isn't overvaluing them, and the analysis agrees. There's no necessary value here, and it's not necessarily a trap. They're just correctly priced. Some of the sells that we're going to touch on, we'll touch on Buffalo. They're priced like an elite team, but their efficiency just hasn't matched up the price, and betting them has consistently cost money. So you're going to be paying for the reputation. Next will be Denver. They're also a sell. They're good, but not as good as the market price suggests. Their path is tougher than it looks, and the upside doesn't, justify the cost. Chargers are also a sell. They've been decent in spots, but the structure isn't strong and not healthy enough for an extended run. They're priced ahead of what their performance actually supports. And then we'll finish off with Buffalo. They're also a sell. They've been one of the worst teams to bet. Their efficiency is weak, and structurally, they're just too fragile. This is one of the clearest cases of a name value over actually, reality. This isn't about picking winners, though. Just remember that. This board's not about picking winners. It's about avoiding taxes and finding mispricing. So some good teams are bad investments. Some flawed teams are still overpriced. And a few teams sit in the rare spot where price and reality don't actually line up. So that's the AFC, not through opinion, not through hype, but through price, performance, structure, and probability. This is what the market is saying and where it may be wrong. So if this way of breaking down the league is useful to you, hit that like button. That tells us that the Ball Street approach is worth continuing. If you want us to run the same framework for the NFC, drop the NFC in the comments section down below. And if you're interested in market-based sports analysis, consider subscribing to Grandstand Sports Data. This channel is about understanding price, risk, and value before the market catches up. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.